Hey everyone, my name is Adam Rippon. I was a bronze medalist from the 2018 games, and I'm so excited to be here today. I'm here with two of my former training mates and my friends. Yes, they're both. Um, I'd first like to introduce Ashley Wagner. She's also a bronze medalist from the Olympic Games in 2014. And our training mate, who is a three-time Olympic medalist, he was a bronze medalist on my Olympic team in 2018. And then he went on to win two gold medals at the Beijing Olympics. And up until a few weeks ago, he was the reigning men's Olympic champion in figure skating. He's still like the legend forever, right? Nathan Chen. Before we get into the conversation, I just want to say a few things about the museum. I've been there myself. I was there for the very first time over the summer, and it's an unbelievable place. I remember when I walked in, I just thought it was so beautiful. And I remember I called Ashley after I left and I was like, Ashley, I almost cried in the lobby because when you're an Olympian and you walk into the museum, the entire staff comes out and gives you a round of applause, which I would never say no to. And it feels like very emotional. They say welcome home. It's so beautiful. And to walk through the museum is such a special experience as an Olympian. And I think if somebody who's just a fan of the Olympics as well, it's such an amazing place to have to visit, to learn about the history of the Olympic Games, and to know that you're in an Olympic city in Colorado Springs. So it's beautiful. But when we think about the Olympic Games, we think of those Olympic moments, but there's so much that leads into those moments. So I want to talk a little bit about the journey, and I'd love to start with Ashley. Can you talk a little bit about something like when did skating shift from something that you loved into something that was something that you were building towards more of like a career?
I remember, so I started skating because I am an army brat and we were stationed in Alaska at the time. And so back then, they used to freeze over the parking lot of my school. And so for recess, you could go and skate. And I was in kindergarten and just thought that was the coolest thing. And that's how I started to skate. But moving around so much, I was really fortunate. My parents kind of understood early on that I needed something really stable and structured, especially when everything was new. And so the rink became this one environment that was super predictable and familiar for me. And it was really grounding throughout my, young life. And then I would say skating started to be something I was taking a bit more seriously, maybe when I reached like middle school. And I had watched Tara Lipinski back in 98. I was like six at the time. And when she won that Olympic gold, I mean, we all remember she sees that she's won and she's like jumping up and down and screaming. And that was just like, it looked super fun. And so I told my family I wanted to be an Olympian then and there. And they were like, okay, sure. I'm absolutely, honey. But
I
it
want to
wasn't until
scream
we
on
kind of,
TV.
I want to scream and jump on TV. That's really what I want to do. And lucky for me, I get to do that now. But in middle school, we were just finally stable enough and in the same place. I worked with this incredible coach. Her name was Shirley Hughes, and she gave me structure. And I think that was where I really thrived. Was once I got that stable training base, I started to kind of take it more seriously. And then from there, it just kind of took off.
Nathan, can I ask you the same question I mean, I remember reading about you. You're from Salt Lake City, an Olympic host city itself. I remember all of the things. I remember reading about you when you were just like a baby. I mean, I still think of you as you're a grown adult, and I have no right to say this on a live stream, but I still think of you as like this young baby, but you're a grown
I still
man.
remember you as like the version that we trained with at Artesia. That is
Yes.
like how in my mind you are forever going to be.
But can you
Very
talk a
fair.
little bit about your journey and when did skating turn into something like, can you tell us a little bit about like how you fell in love with it, if you even
Mhm.
fell in love with it, or if it was something that you just were always doing? I'm so curious to learn more about it.
Totally. Yeah. Well, as you alluded to, 2002 hosting the Olympics really was sort of the catalyst for me to be able to access skating in general. My dad was supporting myself, and I have two brothers and two sisters, so large family, like yourself, Adam. But was raising all of us on a PhD salary, and as a result, things were a little bit tight financially. But because of the 2002 Olympics, they opened up a bunch of rinks in Salt Lake City, and all government supported. So it was what $100 for a year of public skating, which is unfounded. That's not possible in California. And I remember like freestyles were $4, and they raised the price to $6. My mom like had an aneurysm. She was like, "How are we going to afford this?" And then we moved to California, and it's like $25 per session. Um, but really, because of that, because of Salt Lake, the 2002 Olympics, all the support and infrastructure they left behind made it super possible for me. And also because I had two older brothers, two older sisters, they were off doing all these things. I was too young to go to, I was too young for school at that time. So it was like, what do I do? And my mom just put me in the ice rink, and just very quickly, that was where I found my home. And it was, I definitely, very quickly fell in love with being on the ice. And I think things just like snowballed so quickly, right? Like I really quickly was competing at regional, sectionals, nationals, and it just kind of absorbed my day to day. And I think it wasn't really until California, when I moved to California when I was 13, that I recognized this is like, I'm very, very committed to this. This is something that like I have to see all the way through, even through all the ups and downs, even during times where I definitely don't want to see it through. Like I have the responsibility to see it through. Um, and yeah, I think that California was really the shift, because I also at that time my brother was still in high school. And so we sort of in ways had to split the family, where my brother and my dad were staying behind in Utah, and my mom and I came to California. So that was definitely quite a sacrifice on my brother's end, and I really, really appreciate everything that my family has done to sacrifice and allow me to have this journey that I've been able to have. But through that, I think that was where I recognized that I have one path, I got to see it through and do the best that I can. And the flip side of that too is like, as coming from a Chinese background and being so interested in academics, my mom was like, "Well, skating is a way for you to have a cool like college essay to write about." And so that was sort of also an end goal for me, where it was like, okay, as long as I can get to a point where I have something cool to talk about, something substantive to write about in an essay, then I've at least done one part of it. But of course, the Olympics was the main thing that carried me through. As a kid, being in Salt Lake City, seeing Apollo Ono's face everywhere, the Olympic rings everywhere, I was like, that is what I want to do.
I mean, it is insane to think of your mom thinking of like you winning three Olympic medals as something, I say in quotes, cool to write in an
Right.
essay.
It's a good essay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good luck with your
Good
admissions.
luck with your essay.
Wait, but Adam, I want to hear about when you started to feel like skating was a bit more serious because you started skating later in life.
Yeah, I started when I was a little bit later. So, just like all three of us on this call, we all eventually made our way out west for coaching and for different like trainers and whatever. But they all had like humble beginnings. And for me, I would go skating every winter. I'm from the East Coast, Scranton, Pennsylvania. Nobody's cheers. Great. And it would be very cold over every winter, and every winter I'd go skating, and every winter I hated it. And so I never wanted to go. The only thing I wanted was a soft pretzel and a hot chocolate. And then I'd be like, that would be it for the year. Thank you so much. See you next year. And then there was one year where this indoor rink opened up, and there was someone in my class who had a birthday party. I went and there was just something about like the very choppy ice where I was just falling less. And then there were kids in the middle who were doing all of these like tricks. And I don't know what inspired me to go into the middle and be like, how do you do that? But I did. And that's how I made like my first friends at the rink. And I was always like the shortest and the smallest kid on my like baseball team and soccer team, and I played tennis for a little while. I was whatever the opposite of a savant is what I was at those. And skating
Normal.
was like the first time that I felt like I fell in love with something that I wanted to do it all the time. And slowly but surely, I've just naturally progressed into this thing that I felt like I was taking more seriously and had bigger goals for. Which kind of leads me into my next question. Nathan, you were talking a little bit about it, about like how this became your everyday thing. Can you walk us through what like a normal training week would have looked like for you when you were like in the heat of training for an Olympic Games?
Hmm. Yeah. It changed a lot, actually. I think in 2018, like I really lived by the mantra that like working in order to achieve success, you just have to work for it. Like that is the only factor that matters. And so as a result, I just felt that that was the one thing that I could control, and that's the one thing that I'm going to try to optimize on. And I burnt out because as a result of that. I didn't see the importance of taking time for yourself, taking time to do things that you really like, things that always revolve around training. So 2018 was really just grind mode the entire time. 2022 really shifted that mentality. COVID definitely was a big component of that as well because we're just restricted. We don't have the ice time that you would conventionally have. But also, I think having had the chance to go to college after 2018 and see that I can succeed generally. I mean, I'm maintaining. I'm not necessarily improving, but at least I can maintain off of an hour and a half, 2 hours of training per day.
You were improving, by the way.
Well, thank you. But that was really helpful for me to see, just to force myself to see that I can also diversify my time and do things that I really enjoy. So in 22 is a mix of making sure that I was spending time with friends. So I would wake up in the morning. We would have our edge class with Ralph in the morning. And this was like maybe pre-COVID-ish. Around COVID, it was kind of like we were doing this on our own. But we would have like a 15-minute or so edge class, just focusing on basics, technique, flow, those kind of things. And then I would basically have like a short program section where I'd just work on my short program, and then another session later in the day where I'd work on free program. And I was kind of repeating. I'd get to the rink around like 9 or so, and I'd leave around like 3, 4-ish. Sprinkle in some days of stability, some days of working with Brandon Cycle, who works at the USOPC, to do strength and conditioning training, and then maybe do two or 3 days of rehab, so like physical therapy and soft tissue work, which would let me leave the rink around 6 or so. And that was kind of my 9 to 5 for the most part. But through that time, I think before it was very focused on like, okay, the whole time you're maximizing. Whereas then it was like, okay, I have a 45-minute or 50-minute session. Let's really try to optimize this time to hit all the goals that I'm looking at. And then as I'm off the ice, no more skating, go do whatever it is you need to do. And then when you come back in, you're really focused on training again.
Do you think that's something that you learned with like age? That as you got older, you realized the importance of like having that healthier balance and that it actually improved what you were doing on the ice?
Definitely. I think also just you all can attest to this too, but I think having a voice in the back of your head that's actually like a tangible voice. It's like if you take time off, you're lazy. If you don't do X or Y,
Yeah.
you're lazy. I
Yeah.
think that voice was very strong in my head, and like my voice paralleled that. So we're all in unison saying you cannot take time off, you cannot X and Y, and I would always get hurt. I would always burn out. I would always just be like
Hmm.
so over it. And so I think a mix of sort of like rejecting that in some sense of saying, yes, I know I need to put my quote unquote 10,000 hours in. I know that I need to put the time in and I need to plan, strategize, and all these kind of things. But at the end of it, also recognize that my life doesn't end with skating. And I think tying my identity and everything that I had into going to the Olympics, to winning the Olympics, and all these kind of things wasn't a healthy way of approaching the Olympics, and actually, in fact, would impede on my results at the Olympics. And so, being able to sort of separate that, being like, okay, skating is awesome. I love the journey. I love all these things. The medal would be awesome, but if I don't get it, I can accept that, and that's okay. But I also know that I'm a full, complete person outside of it. I think that was something that really helped, and that allowed me to sort of push aside some of the voices of being like, if you're not giving 10,000% of yourself to this every single second of every single day, then you're worthless and lazy. And I think that
Yeah.
sort of mentality switch was really helpful.
And I was actually the voice that was telling you that you're worthless and lazy. I was doing that
Exactly.
every day. Any chance I got, I'd kind of whisper that into
You be
your ear.
texting me.
Uh-huh. I was testing you. Um, Nathan, you talked a little bit about it before, but I want to ask Ashley about this specifically because I remember when we would be training that like what you were just talking about, it's exhausting. And
Hmm.
even when we do try to find this like really healthy balance, which I actually felt Ashley did really well, and I always tried to implement this into my own training of I would really lean into like doing a little bit too much but
Hmm.
Ashley had such a good, and I always felt very healthy balance between like her personal life and her professional life, and they helped like marry the two. I want to talk a little bit about burnout. Nathan touched on it a bit, but Ashley, I wanted to talk to you about it because there were definitely moments when we were training where you would turn to me and you go, I'm so like your hands would be dragging on the floor. You'd be as limp as a raisin, and you'd go, I'm so tired.
Yeah.
And I want to know, like, how did you navigate the burnout? How did you find the motivation? Can you talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that?
I mean, I don't think I navigated the burnout. I think the reason I had a really long career, I was my first competition representing Team USA. I think I was 13, maybe, and I competed all the way through 27. So I was competing at an international level, at a high level for a really long time. And I think the reason why I made it as long as I did and saw the success that I found was because you truly cannot make me do something I don't want to do. There's just no way. You really can't. If I don't want to do it, it's not going to happen. And that was, to my benefit sometimes, and at other times totally what got in my way. But I
When do you
think,
think it was to your benefit?
well, I mean, I think of Nathan's approach, second Olympics. I think of Alyssa Liu retiring and coming back,
Mm.
and there's this exploration of identity that I hear happening that makes a complete difference in performance quality because now what happens on the ice doesn't totally define who you are as a person. It doesn't, there are other people that know you that aren't skaters, that your life is fuller, it's more complex. And so that only benefits athletes when they expand their world. And so it was to my benefit because if I needed to go and I had that voice too of if you take a break, if you go home for Christmas, you're lazy because you're not going to be
Mhm.
skating as much and you're going to get fall behind. But for me, like going home was mandatory. I needed to go and reset. I needed to go and be someone other than an athlete. And was I on the ice less? Yes. Our coach Raphael was right. I was not going to be skating as much. But for me and the athlete that I was, I needed that break in order to be able to come back and dive headfirst into the training that I needed and the exercises he was asking of me. So it definitely benefited me at times, but other times I think it got in my way simply because I didn't always use it in the right way. I could have, you know, I think at the end of my training day, we can all attest to this. Like you're fried. You've nothing left to give. It was Netflix and chill, literally every single day after training. And I could have used that time to explore other aspects of my identity, and I just didn't have the energy to do that. So that's kind of where I think I didn't push myself beyond. And that's when burnout ended up catching up to me. My last Olympic trials was 2018. I was not on that team. And I was bargaining with myself every single time I laced up my skates. I was like, you only have to do this two more times. You only have to do this maybe one more time. And that's just not a healthy way to ever compete, participate in your sport, exist, and you're just not going to see the performance. So I don't think I escaped burnout. And I think a lot more athletes now, at least it's part of the vernacular. Like we can talk about it, we can identify it. I don't
Mhm.
really think it was such a thing even in 2018. Um, and so I'm happy for athletes now because they have verbiage to use to identify, like, whoa, maybe it's not that I'm tired because I train hard and I'm an athlete. Maybe I'm burnt out. We have something called REDS that a lot of female athletes are dealing with. And now I look back and I'm like, I absolutely had REDS, but that like intense exhaustion. Now I just think athletes can identify it and do something about it sooner.
Ashley, what's Reds?
REDS is basically, oh my gosh, I need to get the acronym correct, but it is more predominant in female athletes. And it's basically that your energy output versus your energy input, they're not well matched. And
Hmm.
because of that, it ends up, you're going to be more likely to be exhausted, get injured. It affects your bone density. Um, I know that there's someone listening to this conversation who's like, this is what REDS is, but there's a lot of research being done on it now, and it's just so relative energy deficiency in sport. So
Hmm.
check it out.
So Ashley, you talked a little bit about this, but I want to talk about this like between the three of us. And you brought up Alyssa Liu from the Olympics in Milan. And I think that her win was the way that she approached this competition was in the way that we are told, like, this is how you do not find success.
Hmm.
That, like, you have to have the blinders on right towards the goal, nothing distracting you mentality, and it's the only way to become a champion. And when I was in Milan, and I was watching that women's event with Olympic champion Ali Raisman, and I remember the gymnast, if you didn't know. And when Alyssa won, Ali said something that that really struck a chord with me, and she was like something about her winning because I was telling her all about Alyssa's story and that she retired after that of the Olympic season in 2022, and then she came back 2 years ago, and that she was really doing this on her own terms. And when Alyssa was like getting onto the podium, Ali turned to me and she was like, "There's something about this moment that feels like it's healing me. Like I feel like a part of
Mm.
me feels like I've there's a part of me that's healed." And then obviously like Ashley and I have a skating podcast that we do with a friend of ours, Sarah Hughes, who's not the Olympic champion, Sarah Hughes. And so we talked about this on our podcast like right after, and it was we also felt the same way. And then I go online and I saw Nathan was also in Milan, and he was working for Yahoo. And I saw him have to break down the women's event. And I saw Nathan explain this event with more joy than I have ever seen him have in his entire life. And I feel like there was a little part of all of us that felt like, wow, like she won, really doesn't give an F about those medals. And it was like
Mhm.
throughout her whole like media experience, we've seen that like she really just wants to be out there and she's doing what she loves. But I wanted to talk a little bit about like, we've always had that mentality of like, this is how it has to be. And we do feel like we're kind of risk taking of like, no, I'm going to explore other options. And it is that like, you feel like you're dancing with the devil a little bit. And
Mhm.
then we saw somebody out there who completely, obviously, like she has this attitude where it's like, wow, maybe she doesn't care, but you don't become a world or an Olympic champion if you don't care. Ask Nathan. He's both of those things. He cared. And it doesn't happen by accident. It happens absolutely like by putting all of the work in. But I remember watching that. I saw like Nathan, you were smiling ear to ear. You looked like the Cheshire Cat. When you were watching those moments in Milan, what was going through your mind?
Yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head there. I think there's like a soft social norm, like an unspoken social norm that I think that we're not allowed to necessarily feel that way. And I think watching her skate the way she did with the sort of intention that she had was really just freeing for a lot of athletes. Because I think the status quo, right, is that we have to just be this like insane machine robot that is so
Mhm.
like, and you have to like nothing in the world can get in the way of that, and you're going to have to overcome the most incredible obstacles of all time, kind of thing. But she just seemed like the way that she approached it, and I think something that I'm actually curious to hear what the two of you think is that she's been like at the bottom, right, and then she was
Yeah.
able to get to this like moment of freedom. Do we need that moment of like me 2018 to be able to get to 22, or is there a way in which we can all just not have to have that pit before we're able to reach the sense
Yeah.
of like, you know. but for me, I mean, to your point, absolutely. I think you have to care to some degree, and I think that's where strategy comes in. That's where her working with her own incredible coaching team. With I worked with Masi in 22, and I felt that same sort of like love and passion and just joy for skating, which really stuck with me. Same with working with Shaylin. I worked with Shaylin and I worked with Masi a lot before the 22 Olympics, and those two people really also just instilled that value of just freedom of being there and present and loving what you're doing and not worrying so much about the results. And I think in the moment when you're competing, that's so necessary because I think if you focus so much on the results, maybe some people it works, but I think the vast majority of us, it's not productive to think that way.
Hmm.
But I do think it was very touching to see as an athlete being like, you don't have to feel like the world is on your shoulders. You can just be
Hmm.
yourself and just really love it. But it's still, I'm just like, she still had to have that moment of understanding that that's what she needed after 22 to be able to have her 26 moment.
Yeah,
Do you
Ash, what
think
do you
it would have
think?
been possible for you, Nathan, to get to 2022 if you didn't have 2018? If you didn't, I mean, because you and Alyssa actually do have really similar careers, like both kind of these child prodigies where the eyes have been on you from a very early age. And so, for you showing up in 2018 and obviously the weight of the world was on your shoulders and this is your Olympic moment. It's time to do what everyone has been saying you're going to do and then it doesn't happen. Like, do you think you could have gotten to the more well-rounded place that you were in 2022 without that?
Yeah, the crazy thing is that if 2018 did go according to what we would say, quote unquote, the plan was, I don't think, yeah, I would never have had this sort of quote unquote awakening, right? I would have just been like,
Mm.
oh no, that is how you do things.
Yeah.
Which I'm really grateful it did go the way that it went. And I had this moment where I was like, even as it carries into the rest of my life, I'm like, there's so much, these like, everything that we do is just like arbitrary. Nothing really, really matters to a certain
Yeah.
extent. But it's really the journey of how you like go about it and all that that really matters. And so I think through that experience, has helped me just as a person. But it's crazy. Yeah. I mean, it really in 2018, if it went the way that it went, which I guess now looking back on it makes sense that it wouldn't have. But yeah, I mean, that is a great question. And I think I, if the reality is if it went well, I probably would have retired right then and there and
Yeah.
then went on and done the rest of my stuff, but I wouldn't have had that moment. Um, but I don't think,
Do you think
the
you
thing
would have
that's
retired after 2018, you think,
I think
if you had
if
like
I'd won, probably, yeah, I think so. Like, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean,
Get
it's
your
all
goal to
hypothetical.
go.
Who knows? Who knows? It's all hypothetical. But yeah, I don't. I know a lot of athletes that certainly have that moment where they're just like they grind their way and they achieve their success. And there's now we've seen more frequently that it's not doesn't have to be the case. But maybe perhaps as these are examples of recognizing that you can be a more well-rounded person, maybe we will see in the future a lot more athletes that sort of follow that direct trajectory without having to have this sort of pit, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
I think a little bit about, if I'm reflecting on all of our careers, um, Ashley, I remember, and for a very long time, you stuck to your guns, which is something that I would say you are known to do.
Yeah.
And you had an email address that was something, and at the end of it, it was 2010.
Oh, I mean, my Instagram handle is Ash Wagner 2010.
Is it
Uh,
still?
yeah.
Now, if anybody doesn't know, usually like, like a normal person might be like, this is the year I graduated high school or like college or whatever. But like if you're an athlete, sometimes you'll put that no I mean, people don't use numbers anymore. I don't even know what they do anymore. But back in like our day, AOL Instant Messenger, you wouldn't put your class year, you'd put what Olympic you want to be in if you were feeling
Mhm.
really bold and brazen, which
Yeah.
Ashley Wagner was. And you still to this day did not make that team, but did not change that username. But
Yeah.
I think of like that disappointment for you was something that I think really defined because Ashley did
Mm.
something else that I would never do. Where Ashley at this point wanted to be like was an Olympic alternate for that 2010 team and just was always the girl who like had all of this potential but hadn't broken through, hadn't become a national champion, wasn't on the world's podium yet, but we all felt like Ashley had all of that. She had everything that it would take to be a champion. And Ashley, I if I'm putting words in your mouth, please stop me. But I remember these times of like you called yourself, and I remember like the NBC fluff pieces about like you were the almost girl. And it
Mm-hmm.
was like I was almost the champion. I was almost on the team. And I feel like that 2010 moment in those 4 years leading to your Olympic success, that that was sort of your like not making that team was this defining moment in your career of like, no, I like I can do this. I can do this differently. I can put different pressures on myself. I can see
Mm-hmm.
it through to the other end.
Yeah, I think 2010 made me realize that talent alone is not going to take you all the way. You need to have a game plan. Skating can't just be this thing that you do. And 2018 or sorry, 2010, I think I was going to be like 18 during those games. And up until that point, skating was just something that I did. And I was really good at it, but I wasn't great at it. And I'm
I
saying this
always
from the
said that
pers
about you too. She's
yeah,
good, but
I
she is not
she's
great.
not great. But I mean, I'm saying this from the perspective of an elite athlete where it sounds crazy to
Yes.
say that, but in this world, there are echelons of athlete and talent, and I was always sitting around like pretty good, but not champion level. And so 2010 made me realize okay, I need to consider who I'm surrounding myself with. I need to look at my team. I need to train. I need to be doing off ice to get stronger. I need to make sure that I am maximizing my potential instead of just having potential. And so I think that was really the defining moment in my career. And by the time I ended up moving out to California. I had been like third and fourth at US championships, like probably 7 times at that point. Um, and I gave myself one more year to become national champion. And if I didn't become national champion in that year, I was gonna retire. And
So much pressure.
2012, yeah, 2012 was the first year that I was national champion. And it was because I took that champion's approach of, okay, how many run throughs do I need to do that are clean so I can feel competitive out on Olympic ice, nationals ice? What do I need to
Hmm.
do off ice wise? So just kind of looking at the bigger picture.
Hmm. And when I reflect on my own career, and to kind of go back to that question that you were asking, Nathan, of like, do we all need that pitfall to see the
To
view
get
from
that
the top of the
clarity.
mountain? Yeah. I almost feel like you do. In my own career, it felt like, I was an alternate to the team in 2010. But I was like really young, and it was like you'll just go the next time, and that's just
Yeah.
the way that it felt. And leading into 2014, I was putting a lot of pressure on myself because it felt like, okay, well, you should be a national champion already. Like you should have figured this out. And I was still trying to kind of get my wits about me. And by the time we got to 2014, I did not make that team and I was not an alternate. And at 24, uh, it felt like that was the prime time to do it. And the chances of going for the first time 4 years later would be even lower,
Hmm.
if not completely out of the question. And I had put like almost my whole self-worth into being an Olympian and going to the Olympic Games. Ashley talked about it at the beginning of this call of like, you watched Tara Lipinski. I watched Tara Lipinski too. I wanted to scream on television. I wanted
Hmm.
to be 16 years old wearing rings on every finger in Nagano, Japan. Like
And look at you now. You still
I
do
have rings
that.
on one hand. I did it. I'm like, look, I'm in Nagano. Um, I just felt like when you're a young athlete in a sport that is very like Olympic focused, there are two questions, specifically figure skating. There are two questions you are asked. Can you do a triple axel? And are you going to the Olympics? And those are
Hmm.
the two questions that it basically feels like are the meat and potatoes of like, are you basically it goes in one ear, hits your brain, and your brain hears it as, are you worth something or are you worth less? And then it leaves the other one. Instead
Yeah.
of like these two harmless questions. And it felt like in that moment of like, okay, I did not make this Olympic team, and now I'm even further away from it than I was 4 years ago. I felt like, did I waste all my time? What was the point of it? Did I let down my coaches? Did I let down my family? Did I let down all of these people who made sacrifices for me? And it was, I didn't know if I wanted to continue in the same way you didn't know if you wanted to continue, Ashley. And
Hmm.
I just remember thinking like, okay, you know what? I'll just take it one thing at a time and I'm gonna make this next competition the best one. I'm gonna train the hardest I've ever had. Just whatever happens, happens. Who cares? But I'll never leave it going, "Ugh, I held back or I was scared or I was
Yeah.
nervous." And I skated really well. And then I was like, you know what? I'll take it 1 year at a time. And I just kept skating better. And I maybe wasn't improving in this like I was improving in a different way. Mentally, I was like a way in it, but I also knew that there was a life outside of it.
You were
And
so much calmer in these years and focused. Like the skating was way more intentional. And
mhm.
that's something that I also feel like Nathan, you were really good at as well was time on the ice was you mentally had your head wrapped around what you were going to accomplish that day. And it was just like really measured. And I feel like because of that, that's when both of you really started to see the results. Because I mean, Nathan, I remember you being on the ice and just doing way too much sometimes. And just like you had this, like, I need to do more, I need to do more, I need to do more. And then, like you said, you'd end up injured.
I mean,
And
I remember Nathan doing way too much and doing it all with a cast on his arm.
yeah,
That's true.
yeah,
That is true.
yeah.
No, that's a great point. Yeah, I do think that's true. And I actually, when I was training with you, Adam, I was like very envious, especially heading into 2018, because I just felt like every day on the ice, I was just spiraling. And like the way that I would cope with spiraling is like, okay, I just got to do another quad toe, got to do another quad flip, got to do another one. Oh, I
Yeah.
fell. Okay, I got to do three more to make up for the fall. And then I saw Adam, he was like, every time, every jump was like so intentional, was so clean, and it was like how can I get to that point? And I felt like, as I trained forward, and I also do like that perspective of improving is not, it's not always a linear thing of being like, oh,
Mm,
now I've landed a triple triple, now I land triple triple triple, or now I land a quad, now I land a quad. It's like it's not linear in that sense. And there's so many like there are things that you can improve on that you no one will be able to see except for yourself. And like internally you can recognize that, which I think is really impactful. And actually maybe to your point, in when I was at college, like yeah, I wasn't really improving. I wasn't improving in the conventional sense, but I think mentally there was a lot of growth. And in fact, that was something that definitely materialized as I got time to settle and actually focus solely on skating.
Oh, totally. I mean, when you think of like what version of you would is able to do what you were able to do and under any sort of circumstance or pressure, you think of the 2018 version or that 2022 version. Obviously, that 2022 version, it was like you could turn the music off, you could turn the arena could be on fire. You were ready to do whatever. Nothing was going to distract you from like just doing your best. And it just felt like there was that clarity um, but it's always so funny to hear the perspectives of like the people who like are around you. Because as a competitor, obviously you wanted like there's a part of you that like wants to win or be the best or whatever. And there's also a moment in like the majority of like 99.99% of all athletes where there might be this like it's like a devastating moment, but it's like a moment of clarity where you look around, you're like, yeah, I'm never going to be a world champion and I will
mm,
never be an Olympic champion.
mm-hmm,
And I think like a younger version of me, had I been skating with you, Nathan, and we were around the same age and you were doing all of these things, I would have found it really discouraging. But because I was older, I had a greater perspective and I had such a admiration for what you were doing. And it was actually, I found it inspiring and I found it like motivational and it was amazing. And it also just reminded me of like the different headspace that I was in
mm-hmm.
because it was like, okay, Nathan's success and Nathan's like pioneering technical ways in our sport doesn't take anything away from what I want to do or what I feel about how I am doing or my success. It only adds to it. Like everybody can be successful like in their own way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I only would have had that and I mean what a much better way to like train every day other than going like he's only doing this for an essay.
If I had known that.
But I mean, like, it's only because I like felt like I was at the bottom of the barrel and I had nothing to lose that like I started to just gain this like Ashley, we were talking about it like a little while ago of like last summer you were in France at a
Mm-hmm.
training camp and you were coaching with one of our good friends, Javier Fernandez from Spain. And Javi was telling you that I used to train with Javi when we were really young, and he mentioned to you like there was like some tension between the two
Yeah.
of us. And Ashley was like, "Was there tension?" I was like, "Oh yeah, I was so jealous of like how Javi could do everything, and he just was so like nonchalant and effortless with it, and it like ate me up inside. That like I'm trying so hard, and he has this completely different approach, and it was just like, oh my God, like." And so there was that I just it just like it in it for a really long time until like a few years like after like Javi and I were obviously very friendly, but then we became really good friends years later because I could be
Yeah.
like, no, the reason I we weren't like chitting and chatting is because I was trying to get on another session so I could beat your ass and it wasn't going to work.
Yeah, I mean, I think it takes, eh, I don't know. I Let me figure out how I'm trying to say this. I don't think I was able to gain that perspective until I got to the other side of sport, until I retired, until I started living a life that was so much fuller that I could look at what my competitors were doing that was different from me and not feel threatened by it and not feel like it said something about me. Sometimes it has nothing to do with you, but you need that
Mm,
perspective of just the world outside of skating that's like, oh, you skate? That's cute. Like you need that perspective in order to really understand that. But then, I think about the women's field currently and how they want to win, but at the same time, they're incredibly supportive of each other. My generation, there were a couple of athletes that definitely were like that, but my
mhm.
generation did not foster that kind of friendly competition in the same way. And I, I want to know what it is about the scene right now that has helped these athletes kind of figure it out because I love
Well,
it.
it's I also want to say something of like, when we were first like when Ashley and I were talking about like, the women on the scene internationally across the board, not just like our Team USA athletes who are like great examples of like incredible sportsmanship between Amber Glenn, Isabella Vito, and Alyssa Liu.
Hmm.
But the international crop of women, especially someone
Cowrie.
like Kaori Sakamoto, exactly. And it's just this like camaraderie and sportsmanship that like even to the point where Ashley and I'm like, I know we're broken and I know we're wrong,
I know
but I
we're the
hate
problem.
this.
My first reaction was
Where
like,
are
this
the
is wrong.
bloodthirsty women?
Right.
Right?
Well, because like the only, what motivated me was beating people. What motivated me, and I've talked a lot about this. What was my number one motivator was beating Gracie Gold. I wanted to be standing higher than her on a podium, and I wanted to look over at her and look at her down in second place.
Hmm.
But that also, like research shows, that's a like short-term fuel burst. It's not a sustainable motivator. And because of that, you're going to be more susceptible to burnout. It's not authentic to you. It's not intrinsic inside of you, and it's not going to take you all the way. And as soon as Gracie Gold kind of stepped away from sport, my motivator was gone.
Mhm.
And my performance went down because of that. There's like a direct correlation there. So I really admire these women for figuring out how to motivate themselves for their own independent and personal reasons beyond just beating someone
Mhm.
and more, it seems like it's more excellence focused, which to me I read as much more intrinsic.
And you both have like alluded to it like throughout this conversation, but I wanted to talk a little bit about like you have your moments of success, or you have this moment where you sit down and you go, okay, I think it's like I'm ready to take that like next step into whatever career I want to go into next. What is, and Nathan, why don't you start this since you've talked about like going into school and being in school in that lead up to 2022 and now you're full-time in school. Um, like what is that transition like and what's the hardest part? Or what are some obstacles that you've run into as somebody who like, and it's so different, right? Like it is so different. Like I personally have always felt that like the adrenaline is pumping throughout your body in such a different way as an athlete that when you transition out of sports, it's almost like, is anything hard? Like, hello,
Right now what?
where's the thrill? Yeah. So, Nathan, what do you feel like the hardest part of like leaving elite sports and like transitioning out of it is, and what is that transition like?
Totally. It's actually not a trivial transition. I think I had always pictured, oh, like as long as I'm in college, like I'm good and I know. But I think with skating, it's like you have a very, very, very clear target generally of what you're trying to do. And the algorithm to get there is pretty straightforward. Obviously, there's going to be variables, there's things that you have to sort of overcome and adapt to on your own. But
Totally.
in life, it's just like you have like 1,000 different targets. Like, what are you even good at? Like, which target you even really want to strive towards? Like, I was so lucky, 3 years old, I figured out, hey, I'm good at skating. But with life, it's like I don't have that. And I have to like now I was at the top and now I have to go literally from the bottom and try to rebuild something else for myself. And there's always that temptation of being like, especially like for me, where I'm theoretically I could go back to the sport, but it's like, what is the incentive to do that? And to Ashley's point too, it's like, does that come from inside, and is that internal force strong enough to get you through? In the moment, you romanticize it. Oh, it's going to be so fun. Oh, like I was so good, it'll be easy. But no, it's not. And there's going to be so many like really low moments. Is there a force that's strong enough to get you through that? But certainly, it's been a fun, unique, hard transition. I think trying to figure out sort of like what is my purpose and what is my larger purpose, right? Like especially with skating, I think the way that I rationalized it was no matter how far I would go with skating, there is a very concrete U-turn, a certain point in time, like you just can't really keep going. But with life, this is now the rest of your life. Like, what do you do? How do you sort of address that? And I'm still figuring that out, to be totally honest with you. I think school has been really helpful in talking to friends and sort of getting a bigger picture. I think also, right, 20 years of my life was just like skating and that's it for the most part. Um, but now there's the world that I have to sort of understand and figure out where's my footing, which is not something that I think a lot of athletes necessarily spend much time thinking about, if at all. Um, and that's certainly something that I've been, been spending time to sort of adapt to. And honestly, you two have been really good inspirations in sort of what that transition looks like. And I think growing up with the two of you as well, just sort of addressing how to be a good athlete. And I when I look back at like 2010 era, I was like, oh man, like I don't know how I'm going to even interact with athletes. I just feel like there's a lot of communication that I've not learned how to adapt with, and I don't want to have to deal with that sort of level of potential insecurities because of the result of that. And I felt like having 2018 and having Adam, spending so much time with you and training with you and traveling with you and all these kind of things, and spending time at the rink with you, but then also going to Marina and spending time away from Raphael's camp, was really helpful, frankly, of just recognizing that, at the end of the day, your purpose, as Ashley was mentioning, was you, yourself. What are your goals? What are your intentions? Not necessarily what are these external factors that are trying to push you in a direction, which was, I think very helpful to even just my mental health and my own personality as I was going through it. But yeah, I think going back to the question, it's hard, it's not something that you ever really imagine, it just happens so quickly. I think that's another thing.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
Well, and if you're imagining what happens next, you're not focusing on the thing you're supposed to focus on. It's a distraction, the thing that
Hmm.
mhm.
happens next. So it's almost like you have no bandwidth to do that until you reach the end. And then you're in this like, okay, whoa, I have to connect dots and like right now because I am not going to go and be at the rink from 9 to 6 every single day. That doesn't make sense anymore. So the next chapter, I think, is the hardest one. I think that becoming an Olympian, reaching this level of sport is challenging. No one's going to discredit that. But I find this chapter to be the most fulfilling, but also by far the hardest because there's not a playbook. We can look at Brian Boitano's career. And there's a step one, step two, step three, step four. And for the most part, you kind of follow this track. And then if you're lucky and good enough and hardworking, you end up becoming an Olympian and maybe an Olympic champion. But beyond that, it's not about you.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I think it's really challenging once you get home and the Olympic stage has kind of disappeared. And I feel for a lot of these athletes who are now I don't feel for them, but they're now going through a really difficult chapter of figuring out what's next. Am I going to keep going for 4 more years? Am I going to become a new version of myself? What comes next?
hmm I think that you both r really are like hitting the key of that when you are in an Olympic sport, that the goal is, like you said, Nathan, so clear. And it's you almost trick yourself into thinking like, no, I can distract myself with these other things, but this is how you like go towards a goal. And even if you feel like you are, and I felt like by the time I was like, it was 2018, I felt like I was a well-rounded person. I was doing things like that fulfilled me personally, and I was doing things that fulfilled me professionally. And I really, looking back, felt like I was doing it all for the right reasons. And I still believe that today. And I thought that would lead to like, the only people who have trouble with this transition are people who like don't aren't well rounded and they aren't like preparing themselves for like a normal life like or a life outside of sport. And haha, I was wrong. I think that the thing about it is that because there is some sort of clear target, and I mentioned that like my target was Olympic champion, but I could change that to something else and make it like a more realistic goal of like, no, I would like to go to the Olympics. And then I could change that of going, let me do my best and see how close I can get. And if I go, I go. If I don't, I don't. I'm not in charge of that decision. And I felt like that was like a healthier mentality. But it was still like there were very few targets to choose from. In the 8 years since I've retired, I've worked a lot in entertainment. And I felt like, okay, there's going to be a new like target to like go after, and it's going to be like an Emmy or it's going to be some sort of like award. Even though I had just told myself, that the awards don't matter and like don't go after them, but I was so trying to find something like, where's the finish line?
Yeah.
And in entertainment especially, and it's just like a full metaphor of life of like there is no finish line, and these jobs go away and they change and there's new ones, and if they want to make a position for you they just make one up out of thin air. And it's like, oh, we just will have three correspondents now instead of two, or like, hey, what if we just make this job up? So it's like it really does need to become this internal focus of like, what's motivating me?
Yeah.
Am I enjoying it? There is such a more abstract finish line uh that's outside of sports. And I think that
Hmm.
it's maybe one of those things where it's like we all know what it's like to have like the finite goal, but and it's what makes this like this never-ending journey about learning about ourselves, where it's like there is no such thing as a finite goal. There is no other Olympics. There is no other like, this is the time for me to retire. This is the time for me to move on. Like that doesn't exist in normal life.
Yeah.
And it is like dealing with that balance of like, but you know what it's like to live in a world in which there is a point A to point B. And how is
Hmm.
it do you live from point A to then point B through Z, where there's these unlimited amounts of opportunity? And
Yeah.
I think that one, it prepares us to like set goals, and it's what makes us as athletes adaptable to any career path that we choose, whether it be in medicine or in psychology or in entertainment or whatever, or a combination of all of them.
Mhm.
That like being an athlete sets you up to find success in any of those different avenues. But it is a very challenging, no matter how prepared you feel for it.
You're not
Um,
ready for it. There's nothing you can do.
exactly,
There's
exactly. Um,
absolutely nothing you can do.
but it's not a bad thing. It's just part of it. It's part of like our journey as athletes, as former athletes. But to kind of close this up, I want to ask you both kind of the same question of throughout your whole career, um, is there a specific moment that you think of like, "Ah, God, this is like my favorite moment?" And then to kind of expand upon that, uh, is there some sort of like, is there something that you want people to remember from your career, like your legacy? What is your legacy in the sport?
Nathan, why don't you
Yeah, why don't
talk
you
into it?
start?
Yeah.
Oh dear. No, that's a great question. And
God.
honestly, I don't know if I have a great answer for that. Um, I actually think this is not the ultimate favorite, but it's the first that comes to mind. So maybe that does allude to the fact that it is maybe my favorite. But I think that stars like after 22 and spending time with the whole cast for like months was really special. And it just like really just felt like a celebration of all our work that we put in. Um, in fact, to that point, right, it wasn't the medal was just like, okay, cool. Like it was a really cool experience. I got to stand on the podium and it was like, yay, this is something that I got to do. But I actually didn't really feel like any emotional connection to it. It was just kind of like a thing. Whereas I felt like actually spending time with my friends after the games, with the cast, being able to perform, and even the performances themselves actually felt a lot more emotional and more,
Hmm.
tied to my journey than any of the other Olympic or any of the programs that I'd done. Um, but I think as it pertains to like not maybe not like legacy so much, but just something that I think I when I think of my career in skating and what I like the moment I kind of gravitate to was the 21 I think World in Stockholm short program was like almost a complete reflection of 2018. I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going through this again? Like I thought I was over this kind of thing. Um, but again, like using these techniques of re-strategizing, orienting myself in my head of what's important, why am I here, what's the greater thing that I'm trying to accomplish here, and then really quickly snapping out of that and heading to the free program with just like so much ease and comfort and just like no nothing matters. Like at the end of the day, like if I fall in
Mhm.
every single jump, so what? It's okay. It's just a learning experience and being able to go through that and like everything was just I felt like completely flow state, like nothing in my head went awry in any sense. I was just like following the journey. It just felt like I don't know, something was passing through me that I'd never felt before. And I think that program is the one that like I'll always go back to as being like that was the moment where I felt like I was competent and really, on top and really in control of everything that I was doing. Um, but yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like I think for all of us, skating has obviously been and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but skating has certainly been a really, really big part of our life. But I don't know if our legacy is necessarily tied to skating. I think it's definitely a thing that has helped us grow to who we are now. But we definitely, I'm confident we're all heading into even, quote unquote, bigger and better things, no matter what that means. Even though, again, it's arbitrary, right? We're judged arbitrarily in skating, and in life, everything is arbitrary. So through that all, I'm sure that our legacies are not defined by skating, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, my most memorable moment, I love that your moment was on tour with Stars because
I
I have like a
know.
distinct Stars moment where I'm like, oh, this is camaraderie. This is what it's like to be on a team. Like figure skating doesn't necessarily foster that. So I totally connect with that. For me, 2016 World Championships, my free skate, just standing in the middle of the TD Garden in Boston and entire arenas on their feet. And I was the last skater of that World Championships. And it was just the coolest moment of my life. And I have a distinct memory of being on the bus driving us in, just knowing that I was going to be on the podium because I just felt it. It was one of those skates where you know you can do no wrong. So that would be my moment where, for everything that I've been through in my career feels worth it because of that moment. Um, and then as far as my legacy goes, I was just a huge advocate for female athletes using the voice that they actually have and unapologetically using that voice and voicing opinions. And I'm really proud of um, the groundwork that I kind of laid so that other athletes can kind of go off and be more themselves in the public. So that would be my response. Adam, what about you?
Yeah, when I think of like, there's moments in my career, I think like if I think of like a defining moment, it is honestly not making the Olympic team in 2014. And
Hmm.
it was like that horrible free skate I had at that national championships. If I think of like a moment where like I close my eyes and I can still like feel that moment, it's my free skate from the 2018 team event. But when I think
Mm,
about like my favorite skating moments, I mean, two of them are I remember sitting in the TD Garden and I remember like almost being breathless of like I couldn't find the like power to scream at the end of your free skate. And it
mm,
was some of my favorite skating moments are the ones that I've watched. And Nathan, I remember I was in Beijing. It's just me in the audience and a few of our closest friends. And I just remember like at the end of your free skate, I felt this like overwhelming sense of just like relief because I felt like I had been on this journey ever since you're a grown man now. Now I've at the end of this call, I've come to accept it. But it was like I watched you go through so many ups and downs, and I saw you like grow into the person that you were and were going to become. And it was just like this sense of like just like relief of like no, like this really can happen to somebody who puts in that work and who has all of the tools. And I'll never forget that moment. It's one of my favorite skating moments of like
hmm.
watching you in an arena that wasn't allowed to be full. You filled the entire space, and it was something that I'll always look back. And as for my legacy, I think that I just like hope that everybody feels like welcome and you know and that they can feel a part of this like sporting community because there are so many ups and downs that come with it. But at the end of the day, like it's something that connects all of us still. And we've been through situations that really only we know. And no matter if you've gone to the Olympics or not, it's being a skater or being an athlete is something that you can always resonates with other athletes and other skaters. And I think that's the most beautiful part about sport is that it connects you. It's this extra family that no matter where you are in the world, you're always connected to these people. And yeah, and
Yeah.
it's been such an honor and privilege to be on this call with the two of you. I love you both very much.